the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right, we're back. Thanks so much for spending your morning with us. We appreciate that. We're going to touch on our third segment this morning, which is related to the potential run of Christie as one of the potential candidates on the Republican side of the fence. And so what I want to do is kind of touch on some of the concerns that I have with his particular candidacy. Now, you know, I can tell you that there was a time when Obama was first running back in 2008 when I actually, first of all, I'm a New Jersey, I'm a New Jerseyan by birth. And there was a time when I actually thought that Christie would have been a president of some merit. But after having seen his the way he operates and the methods by which he is now hailing himself as the new candidate, I've got to tell you, and watching him over the course of the last couple of years, you know, in his interactions with the Obama administration and such, I've got to tell you that I've got some pretty harsh words for him. He's had some very harsh words for his rivals, but I've got some harsh words for him because I'm deeply concerned with some of the things that he's saying. You know, he's come out and he's made statements like, I'm in this to win, and I'll do whatever it takes to achieve that. Well, I beg to differ, but that, you know, Machiavellian approach of the ends justify the means is the same problem that you have and I have with what Obama's doing. I mean, really, it's not any different. It really isn't. You see, Obama says it's okay if I bypass Congress on climate change or on firearms or, you know, and pick any one of the topics, the numerous topics he's done that with. Is Christie any different when he says, I don't really care what I got to do to get this job? I'll do whatever it takes. You know, I think there is such a deep divide in the American Republican Party because the old Republican guard is, for whatever reason, been kind of disenfranchised and separated from this new sweeping, you know, sissified Republican, which is basically what used to be the old Dixiecrat. I mean, the parties again are in a position where they're switching their stances and positions and platforms. And you know, to me, that's the perfect evidence for why party politics is not an acceptable way for America to move forward. Because the goal of American, the legislative branch of America, is not to do what's right for the party. It's to do what's right for America, for Americans. Christie has been speaking at length, and he's out there pitching his own record, how successful he is at that, and he's emphasizing, you know, this accomplishment, that win, so forth and so on. And, you know, the truth is that all of that notwithstanding, we've seen a lot of things which he may call accomplishments, which I call a betrayal of his constituency and, quite frankly, his party. And that is, you know, this approach that he's taken to the Obama administration, basically acquiescing and agreeing with their positions on many, many things which are definitely and clearly diametrically opposed to what Americans believe this country should be. I mean, look, folks, the poll numbers in this case aren't lying. Even if the Ministry of Propaganda is trying to shave the numbers, they can't hide the fact that the vast majority of America is desperately against where we stand right now in terms of this president. I mean, his economic poll numbers are down around 35%. I mean, when you think about that, that's stunningly low. Americans are at the point where we believe that, he doesn't have a plan, and he's just kind of flubbing his way through it while he's meanwhile building this vast military wing of the DHS as a domestic army to bypass posse comitatus. Christie has come out and made a claim to Bobby Jindal, who's the Louisiana governor, who's also a Republican. He says, I'm not going to be one of those people who goes and calls our party stupid. There's nothing wrong with our principles. We need to stop navel-gazing, he says. We need to focus on winning again. There's too much at stake for this to be an academic exercise. We need to win and govern with authority and courage. All right. It's not about winning, Chris. It's about doing right. You see, I suggest that the real problem the Republicans have, and why you keep hearing all of the pundits, talking about the fact that the party's fractured and it's seen its better days and all the other blah, blah, blah crap we hear from every media pundit and talking head out there, is this. Clearly, the Republicans don't have a unified plan. And I'll tell you why they don't. Because their membership no longer believes and trusts the leadership of the party. They see, just as clearly as you or I, that the Republican Party has capitulated itself into cowering under the threat of coercion, corruption, money, whatever. And the party doesn't have support because the party doesn't have a stand or a position that's defensible. I can tell you this. If the Republican Party came out and said, we are going to operate as a constitutional republic in this country, hell, high water, feast, famine, death, or disease, and we're going to start by clearing out all of the pollution and the evil that this past administration has put into our law system, our criminal justice, our legislation, and all of these executive orders, they would probably have such a resurgence in support they wouldn't know what to do with it. Here's the rub. They can't say that. They can't say that because they've already sold their allegiance to the dark side. And so what you have is this party flailing about in its death throes. Because the party heads and the participants and the leaders, they're all on the take. They're all on the dole. They're all in on the coercion, the corruption, the gamesmanship, and the misrepresentation and, violation of the party's principles and concepts and precepts. The people, on the other hand, those who are the electorate, the voters who don't really have a role in party politics but thought the party represented them, are finding out exactly how far off the mark their leadership really is. And even the stupidest sheep can recognize when he's being told to walk off a cliff that something's wrong. That is the problem. In a nutshell. And no amount of, Christieisms can change that. He's been slamming Ron Paul, causing further division in the party, because there's a lot of Paul supporters. We're not a debating society, he says. We are a political operation that needs to win. I want you to hear the tone of what he keeps saying. There's too much at stake for this to be an academic exercise. We need to win and govern with authority and courage. Well, first of all, you don't govern with authority. You govern with leadership and example, Mr. Christie. Second of all, you don't win at all costs. Because in doing so, you have violated the basic tenets of integrity and ethics and moral fiber and backbone that you're supposed to allegedly stand for. You cannot achieve good by doing bad. That is a law of moral and ethical and integrity physics that you cannot change, sir. No matter how many times you throw the rock into the air, it's going to hit the ground. And no matter how many times you try to do wrong under the guise of ultimately achieving good, you're going to lose. And you're going to damage all of us in the process. He goes on to say, and his own comments are damning to him. See, I'm in this business to win. I'm in it to win. Well, first of all, I'll read you the whole quote and then we'll tear it apart. I think that we have some folks who believe that our job is to be college professors. College professors are fine, I guess. Being a college professor is they basically spout out ideas, but nobody ever does anything about them. For our ideas to matter, we have to win. Because if we don't win, we don't govern. And if we don't govern, all we do is shout into the wind. I mean, critical thinkers and aware and awake, astute readers, or listeners in this case, would immediately recognize the flaws in those statements. See, I'm in this business to win. I'm in it to win. He repeats himself. Note the I'm as the primary focus and the key operative of that statement. Then he goes on to say, I think that we have some folks. So I am speaking for the we, and now we're going to, as a we collective group, demonize and divide ourselves further by picking on those some folks who believe that our job is to be college professors. In an unveiled slam against college professors. We haven't even gotten through the first two sentences, folks, and already I got so many problems with this thing. The real problem here is this. The Republican Party has lost its way. And the reason that it's lost its way is because it's lost its principles. It's lost its integrity. It's lost its ethics. And it is now plainly and clearly and visibly just another version of a usurper. Think of this as a peaceful revolution, where today's freedom fighter is tomorrow's tyrant. That's all this is, people. This party system and the duopoly concept of it is given to us so that we have the illusion that there is a choice. But the truth is, we don't have a choice. The truth is that what we have is two parties who essentially stand for the same thing. They may, mouth different words, but ultimately their goals are the same. To rule. And to rule whom? Well, there's only you left. I mean, that's the real simple thing in a nutshell. In order for somebody to rule, somebody has to be the ruled. That would be you. And the Republican Party is the guilty party in this case of some of the most massive transgressions of your personal freedoms and our collective freedoms of any administration in the past 125 years. In fact, the last almost 225 years. I dare say that the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, this NSA spying and the development of dossiers on every single American, those are all Republican programs, folks. They were all voted in by Republicans. They were all supported by Republicans. So I ask you again, exactly who and what are you supporting and promoting? What are you defending? Are you finding yourself in the position of defending the indefensible? And you're unwilling to let go of that label you wear so proudly that says Republican? I mean, really, is this not one of those situations when we should just acknowledge that we've been wrong and change our position, change our way? Now, I know that's hard for people to swallow, so I'm going to give you a face-saving measure that will enable you and allow you to move on without that, personal conviction of, I have to admit I'm wrong. The party today is not what it was. And so, while the party has changed, your allegiance hasn't. And you now are in the unenviable position of finding that you are continuing to support that which you abhor. That's your argument right there, folks. You're not abandoning the party abandoned you a long, long time ago. And either you failed to notice it, or your blind allegiance has led you to refuse to accept the truth, the inevitable, the facts. What we do know is this. The Republican Party at this point is guilty of some of the most heinous crimes against humanity that have ever been created and perpetrated by the United States government. I just named them. The NSA surveillance and spying, a crime of unimaginable intent and damage and evil against the American people. Because there's no plausible excuse or reason to have those kinds of dossiers and databases on American citizens. I don't care how much we're doing this to protect you crap you throw against the wall. It's inexcusable. The NDAA and the ability to withhold Americans in violation of every tenet that this nation has ever stood for based on a belligerent act, which is undefinable, so nebulous that it is like a cloud. It's ill-defined, it has no substance, and it can be made to seem to be almost anything. These are programs which are inexplicable in the American principle of liberty and freedom and individual liberty and right to life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness, and the right to own property, and the right to privacy, and the right to be protected from cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, let's not forget that isn't the real purpose of government to defend and protect the smallest minority of one? That is the role of a republic. It's not the role of a democracy. A democracy says, irrespective of individuals, the majority makes the rules. And if some minority happens to be subjected to those rules and affected in a negative way, oh well, too bad. The majority rules. And so if 51% of us say that 49% of you have to do this or that or the next thing, oh well, that's just the way the ball bounces. That is why, folks, democracies always, every single one without fail, have ended in collapse, war, bloodshed, and destruction. So let's take this a step further. The idea of a democracy is that the majority can rule, but only with certain limits, and that's where the concept of a republic comes in. We are not a democracy. We are a democratic republic. Now, yes, the word democracy is in there, but it doesn't mean the same thing. I can say bear, and I can spell it 3 different ways, and each one has a different meaning. And you listen to the context to understand what I meant. If I say that guy's running down the road and he's bare, you don't think he's running down the road with fur on him. You don't think he's running down the road with cement blocks in his hands bearing weight, do you? No, you think he's running down the road with no clothes on, because that's the context. So, a democratic republic says we operate on a base foundational rule of law where all are protected individually as the smallest minority from the whims of the majority. And yet we still have the majority to vote for many things that are necessary to determine and decide and decipher how we're going to move forward as a society. Nothing wrong with that. But I challenge you to hear any Republican, Christie or otherwise, come out and call this a democratic republic. You have not heard the word democratic republic from a politician in decades. They don't use that phrase. They say, our democracy. And that is an attempt, thinly veiled albeit, but an attempt to drive the idea home that, yes, in fact, we have descended into a democracy. And again, I point out the obvious. Democracies always end in bloodshed, massive crime, injury to the minority. I mean, if we were truly a democracy, we'd still have slavery, wouldn't we? And if that doesn't give the Hispanic and black populations reasons to vote for the idea of liberty and freedom, and you know, that's why it's so hard. And I'm going to struggle here because we're out of time. Maybe we'll continue with this in our next segment because it's such an important role for us to understand. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please ride with us as we wrap up this last segment. We're gonna continue on this and talk a little bit about the idea of a republic and why everyone should be for it and stop, putting their allegiances and ties to a party. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. You can find us at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can catch us and this and every other program at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. You can also send me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. Love to hear from you. I invite your comments. Please feel free to give me a shout. We'll be back in just a few moments.